Bon après-midi, c'est ici.
Good afternoon, c'est Lucia 4528368 to join the discussion here at wVent.
And so here's what we've been waiting for all month. Our author of the month, John Robert Lee, being interviewed by my favorite, Father Patrick Anthony, Papa, somebody who, you know, I go way back with and stuff. So guys, I want you to know that I wore my
pause just now, and he really does mean it, because he came out and he ensured that he digged out that shirt wherever he got it from, and he had to wear it.
And look at my shirt. Exactly. See, look at Papa got plaid madras too. So I mean, you know, we're on the same wavelength. I'm telling you. So deep respect, gentlemen. I dressed up for this event. You know, normally I'm in black like I'm mourning. So everybody's like, "Oh, you look so colorful today." You know, it's like. So anyway, so we have with us today our author of the month, and he, you know, as is our normal procedure here with our authors of the month, we actually bring in somebody who knows what they're talking about in terms of interviewing. And so we have today Father Patrick Anthony, Papa, who is going to be conducting the interview and delving deep into Robert's work. And of course, you know, I'll come in every once in a while with some inane comment or something like that. But other than that, I turn it over to you, gentlemen.
Okay, thank you. Right. Great.
Good afternoon to all your listeners.
Good afternoon. Isn't it a wonderful day for us to be here? I mean, the day when St. Lucia is welcoming
666.
I mean, we are world class. It's amazing. You know, I've been thinking, Robert, about this interview. When you think of somebody like Derek Walcott, you know, world class. Darren Sammy, Johnson Chattow, world class. But you know, the thing is this, that although we produce world class people, they don't just spring up like that.
Indeed.
In fact, it's Derek himself who said that whereas he has been, you know, celebrated in poetry, he says if you were to look at the area of law, St. Lucia's produced a guy like Vincent Prozac.
Precisely.
You know, so it's the same kind of thing I'm saying, that, you know, we've produced a Derek Walcott, a Dunstan St. Thomas.
Precisely.
But then we have other giants, Harrison, but we have got other giants who are walking with us now. And they look almost Lilliputian because of our profession. But in fact, they are giants in their own right.
Yes.
And when I thought of John Robert Lee, my friend, John Robert Lee is such an incredible Renaissance kind of man. I mean, when you know the kind of thing that John Robert Lee has done,
Some will not speak about now.
No, so I felt that perhaps one thing we should do, Robert, is that before we actually get down into, and as an introduction into your work, just to share with us, particularly our young listeners, who is this John Robert Lee? Something about yourself, you know, your childhood, you know, where you come from, you know, how you grew up, the sort of things, St. Lucia you grew up in, and that will be a kind of a lead into your work.
Monsieur Jean Saint Lucie,
All right, very good, yeah.
I'm a St. Lucian. I want to say good afternoon to all our listeners here on wVent Radio. I know ever since Marcus and Homer started this program, we've had many listeners to this particular Author of the Month interview. So we big up CDF also. But you know, I myself have worked in radio for many years and TV. I've always loved radio since I was a child. So I'm always aware of the audience out there, and we welcome the radio audience. As to me myself, not sure that I like to talk too much about myself personally, but I grew up. I know, but grew up. Yeah, understood.
They might think that this John Robert Lee is a very old man.
No. Thanks. No, I actually grew up. I was born in 1948. I grew up in
48. That's the year of fire.
1948. I was born 6 weeks after the fire. My mother often told me about it.
God.
In fact, Papa and I are cousins through my mother.
Yeah.
I was 6 weeks old when Castries burned down.
Okay.
So I must have smelled smoke and felt it, because my mother then lived they lived Coral Street.
Okay.
And she always said the story. They were reasonably, I guess, lower middle class. We were reasonably well off. Her father was a druggist and so on and so forth. And then my father and her were living on Coral Street. Because when the fire came in 48, burnt everything from Chaussee right across.
Okay.
And she always said she lost everything she had. In a sense, I show in some poems, artifacts which you know quite well, are kind of autobiographical. In a sense, she lost everything. So we then grew up what is called the Vibutary Road, just outside of Lac Clary. where the Maranatha Church is now, used to be the old McNamara House in La Claire, Marcus neighborhood.
Yes.
And you come down there, turn the corner, and there was a famous shop there, Raymond's Grocery.
Right.
I mean, you know, Papa used to live a little higher, and I would see Papa walking down past my house, going down to town, you know. So we grew up there. In those days, I remember still seeing the first street light come on, somewhere in the 50s. So it was kind of just outside the Castries, a Castries suburb, but kind of rural area kind of thing. Then you went up the road and you turned right into La Claire, which I really always loved to go into La Claire. I actually taught catechism in the Catholic Church in La Claire. Papa and I were part of the whole sort of Catholic young people of the day in La Claire before he went off to seminary. So I grew up there. My father was Anglican. My mother was Catholic. In those days, as Father Anthony very well knows, in those days, if you were going to marry a non-Catholic, you had to bring up the children Catholic. So therefore, that's right. That was the rule of the day. Those days, of course, were long gone. So I grew up Catholic, but the interesting point was, my mother and father were religious people. They weren't strong church people. My father, I never went to church. He gave me my first Bible when I was 12, which I still have. Always encouraged me to pray and to read the Psalms and so on and so forth. So there were spiritual people with a sense of God. My mother was a Catholic. There were times when she was very strong in church all the time, a rosary and everything in La Claire Church, where Papa and I went, and so forth. So, in a sense of what I'm hitting on here, I came from a family who, my father appreciated education. The Lees were my father's name, and my aunt and other people lived on Trinity Church Road, which turns up in my poetry. But I came from people who valued education.
The Archers?
Archer's my mother, precisely. Victor Archer was my mother's brother, who was the principal of the first sixth form college.
Right.
So the Archers, my mother's side, and by the way, I must say, both my mother and father had Barbadian fathers, which also says something about it if you look deep into my work. So they were almost the first generation St. Lucians. But there was a Choiseul connection through my father's mother. I have a Dominican, my mother's grandmother was a Dominican Carib. I think that's where you and I are connected. Dominican connection with Rita and so on. So in terms of that was sort of background for me. Education was key. Faith in terms of God exists, you believe in God, you pray, and so on. And of course, as in those days, matters of integrity, and how you conduct yourself, how you behave yourself, you know. You study well, you study hard, you don't take anything from anybody, it doesn't belong to you. Those good old-fashioned values, which very often we mourn. I think there are a lot of people who still teach their children these things. But certainly for us in those days, those were real values. So that was my background. I went to Anglican schools. Primarily my father's family were Anglicans. So I spent a lot of time on Trinity Church Road with my aunt and my grandmother, who died in 59, my cousins and so on. And Anglican school, then St. Mary's College, strong Catholic influence, and the religion thing is very important. You notice I keep bringing it in. St. Mary's College.
Why Robert is bringing in this sort of religion? Because today, perhaps Robert is one of the leading, what we call Christian writers, poets in the region, acknowledged, as an outstanding Caribbean poet, but who is Christian. So I think it's very important to understand all this background he's talking about his early childhood.
Indeed, yeah. So I went to St. Mary's College in 1960, and the brothers were there, and they were good influence, and you two probably were there at the time. You were senior to us. I think you were a form or two ahead of us. But the Presentation College, St. Mary's College, was a good, strong influence. Yes, religion, also the education. And then I went into those, we had A-levels, so I went to O-levels, A-levels. Then when I left St. Mary's College in 1967, I went to work in Royal Bank of Canada. And there I met another important person in my life, MacDonald Dixon, who we've interviewed here. Marcus, at some point, was interviewed at some point here by Jane King. And through MacDonald, while I was always had a general interest in the arts, I read Derek Walker's articles in Trinidad Guardian. I had a cousin who took me always to the Arts Guild plays to see them. But when in 1967 I went to work at the bank, I met Dixon. Dixon, of course, was already writing. He was involved with Roddy Walker at the Arts Guild. And through him I got involved with the Arts Guild. Then through Pat Charles, great friend of you and me, tremendous influence in my life for almost 40 years. And Pat Charles...
me too. I want to
Come
jump right
on
here
in,
and
man.
say me too. I mean, call her name over there. I mean,
Just talking about people, I mean, Think of somebody like Pat Charles.
Exactly.
You know, you think of
Tremendous,
CDF, you know, you think
Precisely.
of FRC.
Exactly.
NRDF. Yeah.
You know,
CRC. that was
Right,
the song.
right.
CRC, right?
Exactly.
Aquatic Center.
Aquatic Center.
Yeah.
You know, so-
Tremendous person.
Yeah.
And I know for Pavana a great influence in our lives, a great support.
Oh, yeah.
She published my first book in 1975.
Wow.
But I'm jumping ahead of myself.
Okay, yeah.
Because then through Dixon, I got involved with theater. And then Pat Ismond, I must call her name, Pat Ismond, Pat Charles, MacDonald Dixon, man called Stanley Reed. These were the art circles of the day, Roddy Walkerton Arts Guild. So I got involved with these people. Got involved with theater, got involved with literature through Pat Charles and Pat Ismond, became aware of Caribbean literature, more aware of Derek Walcott, began to write slowly but surely, get involved in theater. And then in 1969 I went off to Cave Hill, University of West Indies, where I met people like Alwyn Bully, and that opened, going to UWI, opened for me the Caribbean. I've always felt myself, ever since those years, a Caribbean person. I'm St. Lucian, but it's a parish of St. Lucia. We're Caribbean people. And I've made lifelong friends through University of the West Indies. Roald Gibbons, Alwyn Bully,
Right.
I mean, all the names you can call,
Sure.
your generations around now. And there I really began to write a lot seriously. Because I was studying literature, French literature, English literature, history, and so forth. I was doing a general degree. Got involved with theatre in Barbados, actor and director, writing, traveling around, doing plays. In those days, I had no interest in religion. By the way, as soon as I left school in Form 6, when I left school, I went to work in the bank. I remember actually saying to myself, you know, maybe I'd sort of grown out of whatever church I was dying in me. And I said, you know, I can't leave church now. I'm teaching catechism. But as soon as school is finished, I'm going to leave. And as soon as I had left St. Mary's College, Papa, I must confess my father. I left Catholic Church immediately. Papa was already gone to seminary, so he wasn't there to hold me back. And then I went into, in my 20s, my religion was theatre and literature. People like Derek Walcott, Tamar Brassett were my gods, so to speak.
Yeah.
I just loved that world, you know, and with people. And I got involved in that. And slowly began to write, do theatre, reviews, criticism, literary journalism.
Just let me interject. When did the Rastafarian phase come in there?
When I came back to St. Lucia.
From
Yeah,
UAE. Okay,
I came
right,
back.
okay.
I came back to St. Lucia in 74, 75, taught at St. Mary's College.
Because you wouldn't believe that this guy was one of the big Rastas.
Oh, yeah?
Oh yes. I mean, he has a whole set of poem called
Dread
Dread
Season.
Season, based on his own journey. So in terms of his journey, fantastic journey he's made. Continue, Robert.
Yeah, so Cave Hill did my studies and so on, came back home, worked at St. Mary's College for 2 years teaching. Then my love for radio surfaced. I loved radio, so I went to work on Radio St. Lucia as an announcer. Then I played Bob Marley and Big Youth and you know the rest of it. But that's where also my interest in Rasta grew. I mean, I'd been aware of Rasta from before Bob Marley. I was a Bob Marley generation. And I think the whole Rasta phenomenon experience was coming into the Caribbean more and more strongly. And those years, Pablo, 68 to 1981 or so, I always say, those were the birth of the new Caribbean.
Yeah.
You had Jamaica, province in Jamaica, Trinidad, 1970, you were there for the Trinidad Revolution.
Trinidad Revolution.
You had Rasta and
Caribbean
reggae.
Conference of Churches.
Exactly,
Right.
exactly. I wrote for the paper.
Contact.
You had Rasta and reggae. You had political movement of the left. Look
Right.
at George and Peter Josie here.
Right.
Michael Manley in Jamaica.
Indeed.
Down in Trinidad.
Antigua Ratoon.
Antigua,
and so forth,
it was for us a revolutionary period. And we as a young generation were caught up in that.
Sure.
Calypso was given way to soca. A lot of music was given way to zouk. So the new music, in terms of literature, Eddie Brathwaite's, Kamal Brathwaite's influence in terms of poetry, not just the old-fashioned kind of poetry, but now what Kamal Brathwaite called our nation language. So the dub poets, performance poetry, our own theatre. So for us, you and me, we were part of that generation. And for many of us, it was a revolutionary time in the Caribbean. The birth of Focus Center through you in 1973, indigenization of the Catholic Church, Dunson's and Thomas, an older man, but now beginning to paint tremendous murals showing St. Lucians and their culture in the church. So I mean, there's so much to touch on, but I was part of all of that. I was learning from all of that. And I was contributing through my own poetry, my own theatre. You and I did a production in a church.
Yes.
Moments.
Moments.
At Moshi Church.
Right.
You know, with Luther Francois, you know. Eichel and Carlton Ishmael and so on, you know. So that tremendous ferment of a generation, which gave birth to where we are now. I think ever since the mid-80s, Kendall always says, 90s, we entered the Reagan and Thatcher era, and we saw that things leveled off. But I think the fact that the Focus Center still exists, many of us are still writing and working, showed that the seeds that were planted then have borne fruit. So that's my sort of general background. So I'm back home in St. Lucia. Rasta interests me. I like what I see. I appreciate the philosophy, the approach, our own culture, anti-colonial, not even post-colonial, anti-colonial. And Rasta, I always say, is a logical conclusion to black power. Because Rastas went further than the black power Americans. Rasta said, my God is black. The Americans never did that. They may have gone to black Muslim. But Rastas went further on in black power and said, my God is black, and I can tell you he's Haile Selassie, Rastafari. And so the idea, food, all they did, and I was fascinated with Rasta. And I walked with Rasta for a while, Ulbuski, Sito, for a lot of us.
The whole generation of Rasta, right.
So I have no regrets about that. Eventually, I moved on out of Rasta because I once asked myself the question. By then I had a family, I had children, 2 daughters, Davina Lee. Most people listening would know Davina, who's filmmaking, Esther. And one day I asked myself the question because I was slowly coming back into reading the Bible, into faith, into a religious consciousness. I guess the roots of the seeds my father and mother planted were not coming again. I was around you a lot, okay? And you were a priest and you were seeing what you were doing. But slowly I came back into a, if you're on the religious spirit consciousness. One day I asked myself, could I ask my children to pray to Haile Selassie? And the answer was no. At that stage I knew I'd gone as far as I could with Rasta in terms of social ideas, political ideas, cultural ideas. Religiously, I came back, and for myself I found Christ Jesus, Jesus Christ, of the Bible itself. And for 30 plus years now I've remained a Christian. And for me, and I say this to Marcus because I've heard Marcus on what he sees is happening in the so-called Christian religion around, and I share many of his own concerns. But for me, my faith is the root heart of the biblical revelations of God in man, Christ Jesus. Now, you and I know, Papa, we're not fools, and we have made our own speaking out over years. We know all the things in the name of Christianity, the genocide, the racism still going on, all the things that were done. But you chose to remain a priest in the middle of that. I chose to remain a pastor, I'm a Baptist pastor, a Christian in the midst of that. We don't ignore all that's happening in the name of Christianity today, what's happening even in the name of Allah and so on, of Islam. But I think for us, and I can speak for myself, in the heart of the faith, the person of Christ, the word of truth of revelation in the Bible, has remained for me at the heart of all I do. So I am a Christian writer, and I understand everything that's being said. I agree with a lot of the criticisms being made, but for me, it's a personal faith which makes sense, answers my questions, and therefore I have no hesitation in accepting the label of a Christian writer. And so
that's kind of a sort of journey into Robert's own life and so forth, where he is at the moment. Now, Robert, listening to you there, some people might only think that this is, well, Robert has been a radio announcer and a poet,
a teacher,
but you've done many other things too. Let's talk a little about some of that thing, like your journalism.
Okay,
journalism.
I always loved journalism. Again, you see, you go back to your parents, you know. My father bought the Trinidad Guardian on a daily basis. I'm talking about the 50s, man. Many people don't even know what a Trinidad Guardian is. I read Trinidad Guardian as a child. I read Derek Walker's articles, I read the comics, read the articles. I always liked literature. I think I always did well at those things. In my 6th form, I went and did maths, physics, chemistry, and failed all. I went to university and did the arts. Of course, that was where my head was at. But I always loved literature, loved reading. My mother was a reader. My father was a reader. Now, I say this because in a place like St. Lucia, the reality was, especially in those years, not many parents were even literate. So I grew up in a home with a mother and a father. Mother and father who were literate. They were not rich. They were relatively poor. But they were educated. They read. My father bought me books. So all that fed into my consciousness. So literature, reading, writing, journalism. I loved radio, as I said earlier. So as I grew older, did my literature degrees and so on, I gradually moved into writing for newspaper. My first review, 1969, I wrote a letter to the press criticizing the play Beckett, which was directed by Dixon, my friend, with whom I worked. Dunstan wasn't, but the play they didn't do very well, so I actually, in my naive young wing, I wrote my letter to the press and really criticizing and hitting them. Man, some of them promised to throttle me in Constitution Parkman. So my first review, I entered the fray, you know. But as you know, for years, I continued reviewing social articles. I wrote many columns, Christian article columns, review columns.
Robert, I want to jump in. I'm just curious. So you had a literate family, and they encouraged you reading. Tell me how Creole fit into that whole mix. Was there a problem with Creole?
No. I was never ever told in my home not to speak Creole. But remember what I said earlier. Both my mother and father who came from Barbadian parents. So they knew Patois, they knew Creole and so on. But my first language was English. We didn't speak Creole at home. Now and then you'd have somebody working for us, my mother would speak. But often people saying, we were told never to speak Patois. I was never told that in my home. I came to speak Patois more fluently even later on. As I got older, especially when I came back to St. Lucia with FRC and did other things, I began to use Patois more. I preach in Patois when I have to. So through FRC, I have to credit to FRC, which Pablo was the founder. A lot of people like myself, intellectuals, university people, writers, artists, even those who didn't go to university, we began to learn about our culture through the work of Folk Research Center. Paba and I and the group of us, Boots and all these people, we'd go all late hours all onto Bouton to record people dancing and singing and so on. So my education of my Indonesian culture came from the Folk Research Center where I work now. In a sense, I'm almost paying a debt now by working with FRC now. And so a lot of us learned about our culture, as St. Lucia learned about our culture, through the radio programs of FRC. Which were done by 3 o'clock in the morning. I'd be recording programs. He said, "Oh, Robbie, come, record something for me." We worked very ad hoc, but the programs would go out to great influence, So that was Creole for me. I still don't write in Creole. I have a lot of Creole references in my poems. I talk about Creole dance, Creole music, and so forth. But I'm not a Creole like a Kendall or George Goddard would write in Creole. I'm not that confident, I would say. So for me, English is still my first language,
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. I want to go a little deeper into your social commentary, Robert.
Sure, right.
At one point, I remember you and me were actually taking on the society.
Oh, yes, to columns, regularly.
Through
Yes,
columns.
absolutely.
So you were not just doing literary criticism
No.
and reviews of plays and things like that, but you were actually involved in the political and the social economic.
Took on John Compton people soon.
Right.
In fact, I was speaking to Rick Wayne only on Saturday, and Rick may be listening today. Hi, Rick, if you're listening. But you talk about some articles I'd written when Kenny came into office for the first time. And then he called back and said, but Robert, I remember you did write other kinds of articles which were pretty tough and so on,
Right.
Yes, I did a lot of column writing, social criticism, social critiquing. I would pick up things I'd read and applied into our society. Then later on, when I became very involved in Christian faith again, I began to write Christian columns. But my approach to Christian column writing was this. Somebody happened to say Linda was killed.
Right.
I would start off with that. But by the second half of the article, I'm making an application, a biblical Christian application to this situation.
Right.
So I did political things, social things, put it out there, and then made an application from my own Christian point of view. So I did that kind of column writing. I did reviews of literature, as you said, Of course, also a lot of radio and television.
Right.
I've done a lot of television interviews. I had programs on TV right on his work. Later down the line, 98 or so, when the Labour Party first came into office, I was the first Director of Information Services. So I worked a lot on NTN doing interviews and so on and so forth. So I've done quite a lot of work in terms of radio and TV work. I like the interview format.
Right.
I should say that. I like producing, but I also like the interview format. I think it's a form, an art form in itself, if you know how to do it. How do you bring out the person you're interviewing? I don't believe in like Rick mentioned Rick again, that adversarial kind of journalism. No. I believe you can tease things out of people and bring them out in a way that they will say they don't know what they're saying, but you are able to seduce them out, as it were. And I think that's good interviewing.
Okay, let's talk a little again about you as a librarian.
Yes, of course.
Because that's another aspect
that's
of
my,
your life
that's my,
don't really know.
That's my bread and butter profession. That's how I pay my bills.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Tell us a bit about your professional development.
Well, in 1977 or so, I worked at Radio St. Lucia. Then, because of the radical things, I had lots of kind of things. At some point, I ran into trouble with Jakes Compton, I think. And eventually, I left. I resigned from Radio St. Lucia. And I wasn't working for maybe 6 months or something. Then, at that stage, several things were coming together. I'd really come into the Christian faith again more strongly. I was with a group called the Church of Christ. And then I wasn't working. And one day I met Nicholas Taylor on the sidewalk by Kimlands. I remember clearly. I said, "I'm Nicholas, and I'm not employed, but I think I'd like to work in a library. You do have a place for me." He was chairman of the library board. He said, "You serious, Robert?" I said, "Yeah, I always like libraries anyway. And it's a great kind of profession for a writer and a teacher myself. I think librarianship is a great profession." Okay, so I sent an application, and then in 1979, I think December, I began my life as a librarian, and I'm still a librarian, and I'm proud to be a librarian. I love the profession. It suits me. I mean, a librarianship is, it must suit you. I'm a writer, I'm a reader, giving service, finding information for people. As you know, I've done a lot of research over the years, produced books that entail research. So I've been on the inside. And when I went to Jamaica in the early 80s and did a library diploma and so on, so I did library studies, you know. So librarianship is a profession, teaching is a profession. I worked at Central Library first, and I went to the South Louis Community College, where I worked with the library there under Janet Ford, a very great librarian. I learned a lot from her. I organized the teaching of library technician courses, so I taught for many years courses in library, training librarians. I also taught creative writing courses. And I taught not poetry, but fiction, creative writing fiction, you know, at South Louis Community College, at the library there. I left in 98, I think it was, when Leopardi came in. I like Kenny Anthony, I like what Leopardi was doing. I still do, by the way. Okay, we'll pass that now. Right. But I applied for a job of Director of Information Services. I think I wanted to move on from the college, the library, and so on. Again, I was bringing together my interest in information broadcasting, and I wanted to contribute to the party, to the government, not so much the party, the government. And I worked for about 3 years. I knew it wasn't going to be long, but I gave about 3 years, and then I moved, actually did a consultancy with FRC, and ended up working full-time with FRC. Okay. So that's sort of my career path, you know, and all the things that go with it. I'm also a full-time preacher in my church. I'm an elder in my church, Bible teacher, Bible preacher, so just want to make sure people know that. I want Marcus to know that too. Just pulling his legs.
Now, listening to this man, you notice how huge, how wide, his wings are all over the place. But there's also an area that Robert hasn't even spoken about. Robert is also a short story writer.
Yeah.
Tell us a little about your short story writing.
Well, I was like writing short fiction, apart from, say, the journalism kind of thing, reviews. Because I find a short story more than, I never tried a novella or a novel like our good friend Dixon, who's writing tremendous novels now. The short story, I think, suits poetry. Because in poetry, you go for the concise. As somebody said, poetry is lines, not sentences. The concise, the image, the point, you know, you have to concentrate everything. A short story is kind of similar. In a short story, a good short story, from the time you read the first line of a short story, you're supposed to be into the story. The short story writer will set up things for you from the very first word and line, without going into, like a novel, we spend 10 pages introducing. A short story writer from the first line. So I think that suits the poet. Similar kind of techniques. And another connection with the short story for me, and it happens in my poetry too. Remember, I worked for many years in theater as an actor and director. If you read my short stories, and I've got these comments from people, if I have some friends listening in now, we're talking about this recently, you heard my short stories are very dramatic, because I write a short story like I'm directing a play. So the characters are there, I'm moving them around, directing them, giving attention to details. But I also do the same thing in my poems. If you look at the poetry, Glenn Maxwell, who's a good friend of Derek Walker's, who's here every year now, he wrote a book called On Poetry, and he said something very interesting in that little book, which I quite like. He said there must 4 things to look for in good poetry, and we can apply to short stories too. The prime meaning. Then there are resonant meanings. You read a poem or a short story, there are meanings that resonate, the others are the secondary meanings. Or in a poem, you want to look for the visual. You know my poetry very well. You know my poetry is very visual. My short stories are very visual too. And for the poem, 4 things, very auditory, the air, the rhythm, what are you putting in there. So when you hear the poems read, and all poetry should be read aloud, all poetry is performance poetry or spoken word, right, Homer? Even though we're not on the stage yet doing it. But all good poetry is made to be spoken and to be read. I don't like the word performance too much. My friend Kendall and I always discuss that. I prefer presenting a poetry on performance, but performance brings in the dramatic, where you're almost doing things like a play. But the prime meaning, the resonant meaning, the visual, the auditory. And I think a short story lends itself to these poetic aspects, if you want. So I've done short stories. I often say I should write more short stories, write a book of short stories. Maybe I will when I retire from FRC, and you give me my big bracket. And Marcus brings me as a part-time broadcaster with him.
All right. So you see that John Robert Lee is a journalist, a radio announcer.
Yes, definitely. I still love radio.
An information kind of
definitely
avant-garde in
a very serious way. Because our society, especially small size ours, we need information. Information correct, sound, true to make decisions in information generation. In fact, today we live in the social media age, information. The technology provides all kinds of ways to provide information. Are we providing the right information, correct information, well-researched information? So I often felt myself, that's why I love librarianship. It's a means to provide information which we need to live our lives, really, if you think about it.
So we want to move into Robert's poetry, but before we do that, Robert, talk a little about your role as a theatre director. You had a New Day theatre workshop. I mean, you actually had a theatre group.
I had a theatre group myself, yes.
Yes.
I always loved, as I say, in my 20s, people like Orrin Bully, Milton McCord in Barbados, Royal Gibbons in Trinidad, friends from around the Caribbean. I love theatre. I lived for theatre and literature. You know, as young men, you say, all hours talking, young men, young women together, all hours just talking, smoking, drinking, eating, whatever it is, talking theatre, arguing theatre, talking literature, Kamar Brathwaite and Derek Walcott. So I love theatre. I love putting theatre together. I've acted, I liked acting. I got good reviews, I must say. But I like directing.
Right.
Because directing is like a work of art. You're putting it together. You're putting the piece together. I'll say to my actors, I want a square, not a circle. Okay? As an actor, I want a square, not a circle. So don't come and tell me it's a circle. No. I'm the director, you're the actor. I want a square, not a circle. But within that square, I give you, the actor, all that infinity of space to move, to give me what I want within the square. You see my almost philosophy of it?
Okay.
So the actor can't tell me, well, it's not a square, we're doing a circle. No, that's not in your prerogative. As a director, I want to shape display in the shape of a square. But the actors have freedom now. As an actor, it's like the cricketer. You go on the field. Okay? That's our plan, a batting plan, bowling plan.
Right.
You go within that plan and bowl for me. Don't tell me we're changing the plan. The plan is, that's the plan, which the captain said. You go and bowl. So you as an actor come and act for me. So I love putting theatre together.
How long did New Day Theatre Workshop last?
Not many years, about mid-75 to about 78, I think, about that, you know. In fact, the late Cyril Remy, my brother-in-law, who just died on Sunday, was part of that. We did moments together. But also for me, as for people like Kendall Hippolyte and Orrin Bully, we use theatre, Papa, as you know very well, theatre for development. New Day Theatre Work, we took a long time before we even put on a play. I spent months, almost a year, with Pat Charles.
Right.
In workshopping, learning about the body, how to theatre involves an audience, okay, but drama involves knowing yourself. This body you're using, body, mind, soul, spirit, intellectual, emotional, spiritual, physical, the four bodies of man. What do you know about this that you can use as an instrument to create a role, create a person? So for us, theatre was development through drama. And Patrick and I remember we had books read on this all the time. And so by the time you came to theatre, which means on a stage performing for people, you had prepared the instrument, your body, your mind, whatever, and therefore you brought this to create the role and so on. You see, it wasn't just on a stage performing without the necessary training, understanding of the seriousness of theatre, of what you're doing.
Now, it's interesting. You see, Derek is a playwright, director, poet.
Indeed.
Kendall is a playwright,
indeed, yes.
Director, poet.
Yes.
McDonald Dixon is a playwright, director, poet. You know,
it's a connection. It's all connected.
Right. I think it's important to draw that because, again, people don't know that part of the history.
Because I've done theatre for years now.
Right.
Exactly.
You're just a poet. Okay, so let's now try to begin to go down into your work. Robert, why don't you read one of your earliest poems for us? Just
earliest poems.
A little flavor of your. I think Vocations is one of your. Another poems is one of your first publication.
Okay, I need to borrow this. Okay, I'll read you one of my earliest poems here.
And about what year would that have been?
I would say early 70s.
Early 70s, okay.
I really started to write when I went to university. I did some things here before I went. When I went to Cape, I began to study literature, become more conscious of it, work with other writers and artists. I really began to write seriously about the early 70s. So I have poems from the early 70s and so on. 69, 70, you know? Here's one of my earliest poems, a short poem, which has been anthologized. I think it still works after all this time. Something called Moments. Nothing depresses so much as when, caught suddenly unawares, the heart and memory come face to face and find forgotten pain in a remembered glance or touch that sought to ease that very hurt. And when, in vain later, one tries to fill some emptiness with some moment that the heart should leave to memory, nothing depresses so much. Yeah, it's one of my very short poems.
Now, your first collection of poems, Robert, was Vocation.
Vocation, 1975.
How did you feel about having done your first collection of poems? I remember when Derek wrote 25 poems.
Sure.
How did you really feel?
It's an occasion. It's your very first book. By that time, I'd been writing for a number of years.
Right.
So a lot of work gathered together. Pat Charles, again, she was then extramural tutor. She had done something for long, and she was reviving something called the Yonoloa series.
Right.
Yonoloa was a magazine started by Kamau Brathwaite, who had been extramural tutor here
Right.
in the 60s, or 67. She revived that, and then
Harry had his folklore.
precisely, and that was still heavily used.
Precisely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Pat revived that series in 1975. She published my book Vocation for me through the extramural department. It had drawings by Alwyn Bully.
Okay.
Interesting Walcott story on that little book. Derek was here in 75 to work on Joker of Seville, the play. Met Pat and I to help with the arrangements, setting up and so on. Then Pat told him, I have a new book coming. I have my first book coming. Oh, I want to see it. I want to see it. So you know where we took Derek to see the book?
Right.
To Lithographic Press,
Oh, yeah.
which was his home.
And where Mr. Justin was?
That's right. But I think it was the first time Derek had visited that house ever since he had left.
Okay.
And he actually said, he walked up the steps, he was marveling about, yeah, this is where, and so on and so forth. And later in Omeros, he actually describes visiting the house as now become a printer. And I often think it was that visit he was recording, you know,
Okay.
about that. And he saw the book, he wanted to change the cover title, and Derek had changed the illustration, whatever. We didn't do that. But so it was a time of euphoria for me, having my first book, my first collection out and so on, you know, 1975, and after that.
What were the kind of themes that you dealt with in your first collection of poems?
I don't know, a lot of personal themes, I suppose. It was early poetry. The poetry of first collection always has kind of early poems. I think there was some.
You had something dedicated to Derek or the Walker?
Oh yeah, Lucia. I had a poem called Lucia, and that was a bit long, but poems like Lucia and something called Vocation, which I dedicate to you, Papa, sitting by me now,
Right.
which I'm going to read for you now, if I can find it, looking in my book here. I remember, page 48, I'm just getting it in the book here, listeners. Poems like Vocation and Lucia, I think really marked for me after my initial years of apprenticeship and learning how to write. Things like Moments and Woe, okay. When I wrote poems like Lucia and Vocation, they reflected very clearly the influence of Focus's Center at that time. Because I wasn't back home yet when I wrote these poems. I wrote these poems in Barbados. I already visited and gone with people like yourself and Pat to Kele ceremonies. And so I was feeding into these poems, I think my first really maturing poems, Expensive St. Lucian culture.
Okay.
And I think I was then really big. Those poems, if people are researching my work, in terms of finding my voice as a poet, poems like Lucia and Vocation, I think show that. So let me just read Vocation for our listeners. And Vocation, listeners, was written for Papa, Patrick Anthony, and this was written about 1973, if I recall. Homer, you were already here with us, or you weren't here yet? 1973. No, I mean, 1973, you weren't here with us yet.
Not far of yet.
Not at all.
Well, Marcus, with your permission, I'd like to dedicate reading of this poem, which is dedicated to Papa, to Miss Herma DeMac from Canaries. Okay, it's called Vocation. And so, despite the whisperings, now let me pause and say to our listeners, as you listen to this poem, if you recall some of what I said, the years when Papa came back to St. Lucia, indigenization of the church, it was a radical time, a serious time. People like Papa came up against, and Papa in particular, a lot of pressure from the, boy, I have to say it, the Caucasian priest class of the time who were ruling. And so here's this young black St. Lucian coming with radical ideas from Vatican II and so on, coming to make people put on dashiki in church, sing Creole songs in church, say your mass in patois, and so on and so forth. There's serious business going on.
Drums, don't forget the drums.
One day he has to exactly. He'll have to write his biography one day. He won't talk about it much now. But there was real pressure from the society. And we were, as a group now, Papa was our leader in many ways. We have a group of us. In literature, in art, in religion. And remember, I'm not no religion at that time. I'm still out there with the Rastas, you know. I'm Marcus.
That's a religion.
Right. Right. I'm half joking, so I hope our Rasta brethren don't take offense.
Exactly.
Just teasing. No, just teasing. Okay? So this poem reflects those poem reflects all of that. Yeah, so I hope they don't find my head. But guys, just a little joke at teasing. Okay? Nothing negative meant here. Vocation. And so, despite the whisperings behind hands clasped in fervent unbelief, despite the stale old lady scent of righteousness that crawls from under friends' soutanes, and despite all that and more, this is yours, your claim on love. They could have asked, They could have asked the blue-smoked hills, the country mandolins, old trembling-nosed, broad-voiced chanterelles. They could have asked. They could have asked tracks lost but for some village's dying song, and ballet drums and violons and moonlit ragged choirs could have told and would have told of what they'd always known. That like a hidden mountain stream, caught patience swirling past the ages of the land, nothing dims that vision waiting gently of calm, clean pools below the waterfall. And I, who share a common celibacy that priests and poets must endure, search the purity of syllable, seeking truths you found. Incensed with love, I make too that ritual of word and gesture, wrists uplifted, fingers plucking outward, scratching at this altar, daring faith and hope, changing them into some clarity.
Yes.
It's so Father.
But you did not have the clarity as yet because
It's coming.
It's coming. It's coming. Because that brings us into your next moment.
Right.
Your real dread moment. Because that's where the struggle for the clarity came.
Indeed,
and you have
yeah.
a whole collection of poems called
Dread Season. Indeed,
in
yes.
which you are struggling with the issues, the questions. Can you give us some illustration of that moment from Dread Season? A poem from that.
So a poem from, okay,
yeah,
sure.
that can help the audience
Yes, okay.
feel the tension, feel the struggle. So
Okay.
you spoke of the clarity that you
Yeah.
were dreaming of, a vision, but in fact you're not there yet.
Yes.
You were struggling.
And I guess, like we all go through, and the young people listening today, we all go through from our childhood or our teenage years, young adulthood is a struggling period. Who am I really? Now what my parents say, what my teachers say. And there comes a valid kind of rebellion. All young people. In a sense, you must rebel, you must react against all you've been told. Because really you must discover for yourself who you are. What is right for you. Your mother says, don't do this, it's wrong. But you have discovered for yourself why it's wrong. Then you can say, my mom was always right. Maybe years later, as young, you will grow up and think, now I know my mother was always right. My father. But we have to learn that for ourselves. I think at that time...
Until you make that discovery, which is part of self-discovery.
Precisely.
You will never be at home with yourself.
Absolutely.
Then you'll always be seeking,
Absolutely.
you'll always be searching, you'll always be...
Absolutely. So I think the poems of Dread Season written in 1978, interesting period. Because just before I sort of transitioned into as in Christianity in 1978, I had my almost quite a kind of conversion experience, if you want. A searching time for me personally. I was already married. I think I had one daughter. Davina was born already. But again, you go into a time, you've done all this over most of your 20s, you've done a lot of work already, published books, done things. You have a certain, reputation already. But deep down, dissatisfaction. Not sure where you are, whatever. A confused time. And so these poems came out of that. So let me read a bit from Dread Season for you to give a sense to the people of what we're talking about here. On nights like this, dark hills take pause. Humped knobs conjure to streaming sky, and harbored, safe, night retreats to shallow dormouse of the supine town. And I, becalmed, gaze from this bridge down on the shabby whore beneath. No fable this. For I have seen that face burn black with wanting me. I have watched those eyes grow soft as smoke with passion's warmth. I have had those slender fingers clutch my face. Have heard those pouting lips swear unrealities. I have felt those breasts grow full with promise, and I have waited, lonely, long among hills' mists and snare of blue wood smoke. Have waited love's sweet-tonguing flute among the creaking bamboo roots. Have listened vainly to the distant violons, aired the throbbing drum of earth. And I have wept my youth upon the giggling mountain stream, cracked my age between the dry town's ghetto boards, and come aboard this manhood. To promise of the magic words of art, I set off toward horizons decked with choice. They would confound this choke of dust-filled August hills, this arid town of vague deceits, this comedy of public privacies, French-flavored morals, withered, thirsting dreamers. Lost the freedom that I never had, somewhere between the steaming boulevard and some dreadful, piss-clogged alleyway. At a kind of middling of age, when to be as clear as radewy sand once was is locked in the glinting secrets of the sky, still too young for failure, not old enough to know success, I found myself a metaphor the homeless prodigal. I've heard the evening's belling lure me gently back to lighted streets, soft skirts, tinkling glassware, the installment plan. I've heard the wood doves murmuring tales of dancing hills and lonely valleys too. Heard them moan for bamboo fluting high above the riverbed, where Lucia sits and sings her mother's washing songs. But I have made a pact with one whose name I do not know, with one who waits for me in every dirty dockman's bar, in every corner doorway where I stop to strike a light. She is that familiar swinging hip within the crowd, the profile at the corner of the eye. She is faceless and as many-faced as countless memories left at wedge of many dawns. Maddened when I've stared too long at old men bowed in dark green quiet, calm upon taut veins of violons. She is a ball of fire that among the scented sheets strips firm resolve to limp acceptance of this soul ambition. To name her with the clarity of certain women's grace, a child's quick glancing smile. And I, dread, have come to parched tongues of bays that whisper treacheries in crevices of brittle, splitting shells of burning brains. I too have screamed to mountains, hills to come fall on me. And I, dread, have come, clutching birthright in my sweating palm, have come back to see her sprawl, to see her splayed like this, to see above that open vulgar mouth the gently staring eyes that never change with changing image. Calm, from Calvary Bridge I watched that face that set me far adrift, of all whose promises only this is sure, sure as the charity of this good night, this, an old and broken voyager, eyes all ablaze and tongue gone mad, drifting onwards to receding shores. There's a lot of despair in that poem. It even ends in despair, you know.
And
despairing.
Your search for marijuana,
Precisely.
your journeying,
Of course. All that is
not
there.
finding it.
Yes, dread season, you know.
Yes,
Yeah.
not finding it. And eventually reaching a place where you came to possessions.
Yeah. No, I came to prodigal first.
You came to prodigal.
Because a dread season was the end of a certain period. In fact, dread season ends this way. Very short. Dread season ends by saying, because I have flung myself onto the void and have exploded into stars of nothing that would shine for you, I have known the edge. Because I was confronted, trapped and shocked between the multiple recurring image of my needs in you, I have known the edge. Outspaced, past wakefulness, aged out of shape, and because there are no answers, I scuttle frantic, harboring unbelief. So this dread season ends on a note of despair.
Right.
Nowhere to go.
Right.
But in
And that would have been 78.
78,
78,
yeah.
78.
78, because I was published in 78.
Right.
Okay? At Lithographic Press.
Okay.
And you were very much with me there at that time.
Sure.
But the next major poem to come after that would be Prodigal.
Right. And that would mark the beginning
Of my Christian faith, of my
yeah.
Christian vision, of my coming to myself, because in fact the epigraph to Prodigal is, and when he came to himself. The Prodigal, Luke 15:7. Okay? When he came to himself.
Right.
So we got to take a break now, and then we'll come back on this. Marcus, all over to you.
Okay, thanks, Robert. So yeah, I figured that Christianity and the prodigal son would be a good time to take a break there. So, so we're gonna this is WVENT 93.5, 94.7. Herman and Marcus here on Bon Après-Midi LEC, and of course we are doing our Author of the Month with John Robert Lee being ably and wonderfully interviewed by Paba. So fantastic show. Or I hope you're listening. I mean, we know you're coming up from Beaufort. Welcoming the returning heroes, Darius Salmon.
But you said the flight was late.
An hour late.
Yeah. So I think there's I see it in the Facebook feed. There's people getting down to the airport. There's things happening. So, so welcome home, gentlemen. Johnson Charles, Darren Sammy, and big up to you. I'm sure you're listening in the car as you're coming up the road.
Yeah, we hope so.
Right. So we're going to take a break, and we're coming right back. So stick with us right here on WVEN. Bon après-midi, LEC.
Good afternoon, St. Lucia 4528368 to join the conversation here at WVEN team.
So we're doing our Author of the Month, and that is John Robert Lee, and he is being interviewed by Monsignor Patrick Anthony, a.k.a. Paba.
Yeah, hello. As the term say, yes. So, Robert, we've been following your development, and I think we've gone through the early phases, and now we're saying you were coming to something of a mature Christian faith. You're more in a settled place. Your poems reflected in that collection called Possessions, from the prodigal to Possessions. And then you mentioned that you'd gone to Boston and a little distance.
Fulbright scholarship,
You had Fulbright scholarship, and so you had a little distance in from St. Lucia,
Right.
and that gave you some moment for clearing.
Indeed.
Out of that came clearing ground.
But I wrote in Boston, which I probably could only have done then. I wrote, as part of Clearing Ground, I wrote a collection called Clearing Ground, a long autobiographical poem called Artifacts, which I really even touched really personal things. My mother, my father, growing up, family.
Right.
A little poem I've called Mango,
Right.
watching my father eat a mango in a yard, you know. So it gave me that distance. But I think I can say, trying to speak as objectively as I can, in America, I'd studied American literature at university. But then I was able to go to the Boston Library and borrow records of American poets, read more about American poetry. And I think in poems like a long poem I've called Translations and so on, I really technically began to learn from the Americans. Yes, there was the old English thing, your rhymes, your rhymings, all the rest of it. But what they call the length of the line determined by the breath. I mention that because if you look at my poems like Translations and so on, you begin to see, I think, a real maturing in terms of my technical ability, in terms of form. And a lot of those poems owe a lot to what I learned from the American listening, reading. Of course, I still read a lot about poetry and learning. So I think there's also, for me, developing in terms of technical ability and maturing, I think, you know, because for me, poetry is a very serious artistic, technical matter, not just the content and the feelings, but how you're doing it is important. How you're writing the line, you know, and what you're doing with it. So
okay, the thing that Robert has produced Vocations and Other Poems in 1975, Dread Season in 1978, The Prodigal in 1983, Possessions in 1984, then a collection of poems in 1988, Clearing Ground in 1991, Translations in 1993, Artifacts in 2000, then 50 years of St. Lucian poetry and art, which is a collection. So, I mean, you've been producing, and there's still others coming over. Let's look at some of the influences. Now, you just mentioned the American sort of sabbatical in Boston.
That's right.
That somehow helped you in terms of your technique, in terms of your style. Let's look at some of the early influences in terms of your technique. Derek Walcott, the Brathwaites,
and the English poets, even before that.
Longfellow,
Tennyson, but also people like Philip Larkin, the modern people.
Right.
Yeats. Because something Derek always said, nothing wrong with learning by imitation. So I'll take some poems by Larkin or Yeats and write a poem, say exactly what they did, number of lines, rhyme endings. I like the half rhyme, not necessarily cat mat, but I like cat and Kate. Cat and Kit. So I use, if you look at my, even now, I do a lot of half rhymes in my poetry. To give, again, I spoke earlier about the rhythm and the sound. Certainly the English poets, especially modern English poets, because with Pat Charles, I studied modern literature. I was doing A-level after I failed my physics, maths, and chemistry. A-level English with Pat Charles, right? So I learned a lot of modern English poetry. Yes, T.S. Eliot is a major Christian poet, major poet for me, T.S. Eliot, okay? But then, through someone like Pat Isman, I became more aware of Caribbean writers. The themes, the content, and of course forms, you know. And I've always been interested in form in poetry. How do you write what you want to say? What's the best way? Okay. Of course, I learned a tremendous amount from Derek Walcott. I think what I learned from Walcott most is the metaphor and the image. Not even so much that. I think from Kamar Brass I learned rhythm in thing. And if you hear me read, man, years ago, when I was at Cave Hill, Kamar Brass would come from Jamaica, and it was a great occasion. He would have poetry readings from Elias' collection, and the place, the multiracial center at Cave, would be packed. And Kamar was a great reader, and I think I've learned from him how to read. Okay, so Martin Carter, of course, from Guyana, the dub poets. I learned from a tremendous amount of people. My own contemporaries like the Dixons, the Kendall Hippolyte, you know, the dub poets. So one learns from a multiplicity of influences, you know. But I think the old poets like the Eliot, there's certain older writers always stay with you, the Philip Larkins and so on, you know. But certainly, for me also as a Christian writer, the metaphysical poets, the John Donne, the George Herbert, John Milton. I mean, I go deep into the reading, way back. As a Christian poet, I want to know how do Christian poets write poetry about their faith, but I'm not writing a tract. There's a place for that. I'm not necessarily preaching a sermon, but I'm writing about faith. And for me, and this, I should really make this point now, unless I'm a Christian writer, I'm a Christian writer in my flesh and blood reality. Like Duncan Sonoma said once, I love women. I love to see attractive women. I love to have a good time. You know, I love to old talk. I love to joke, whatever. But it's the whole incarnation. God became man in flesh and blood.
Right.
I'm a flesh and blood man. And therefore, when I write what I Christian poems, you see, how does my faith, how am I writing a poem, what my struggles with something perhaps, living the society or my personal life, how do I write about the reality of my flesh and blood struggles from the point of view of faith? And so my poems are not some tracts or some easy beliefism thing. It's all very easy and take it for granted, and it's all very nice and it is nice and dandy.
Yeah.
Faith, living in this world is a very messy business. It's spiritual warfare. If you're going to live a life of faith in this world, it's a messy. If you want to live it right, you're going to make mistakes, you're going to fall, you're going to stumble. You're also going to get up. When you go to war, man, war is a messy business, man. Whether with guns or with swords, war is a messy business.
Right.
And we are in spiritual warfare in our world, okay? So in my poetry, I always try to make my poetry real, reality. So I talk about, I read Dress Season for You, a lot of sensuality, breasts growing full of promise and so on. Why not? Reality.
Can you
Even
imagine
today.
a head full of marijuana and look at that?
Oh, please. Those are the days. No, but even today, my new book, City, remember, if you read, and you've heard it, you've read it, Papa. For me, my faith must, and like the root of our faith, incarnation, for us as Christians, God became man. He came fully man, fully God, into the human flesh and blood reality. We believe he was tempted like as we are. He didn't sin. We sin, and before we tempt, we sin. But as an artist or poet, I'm talking about reality. Flesh and blood, I like to stay grounded, flesh and blood reality. And so my poems reflect that. And I think that's what gives them its power.
I find in Canticles,
Right.
this is where you're really struggling with this sort of incarnation of your faith
Sure.
within the St. Lucian context, the social and other contexts.
Right.
Can we have a look at Canticles?
Yeah, I'm just going to
I've
open the book, try to find two,
I've
yeah.
always
Love the
used several over and over and over this.
Indeed, yeah.
This beautiful, different blessings to me.
Right.
This,
The first one.
the first one, yes.
Oh, creation praise. I have it in front of me. Creation praise is right.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
I've used that as an opening prayer. For me, it is one of the most inculturated,
Right.
St. Lucian inculturated prayers. And
FRC
can be used
is
for
a
all
focus,
kind of
yeah.
all
It's
kind of
FRC
occasions.
influence for me.
Yeah.
They're learning my culture.
Right.
Exactly.
And when we blessed, I think for Pat Charles's, when we did tribute to Pat, I used it as an
Right,
opening
okay.
prayer. For the blessing of Derek's home, I used it
And when you
again.
called me
I
up
called
to
you
the blue, yeah, come on, read it. Yes,
because,
yes.
because for me, it is so, it captures so much of what it has all been all about,
Indeed.
the journey, the struggle.
Precisely. In our flesh and blood cultural reality. That's why when I say flesh and blood jokingly,
Right.
I also mean flesh and blood cultural
Cultural
reality.
reality,
This is
sure,
where we're
sure.
from. We're
Right,
not from
right.
Europe or
Right,
Russia.
right.
Not even from Africa directly.
Okay. Just let's have
Please,
a
go
flavor
on.
of Canticles.
Yeah, go on.
Start Canticles. Prologue.
You want me to read for you? Okay.
Yeah, do prologue.
Creation praises, right?
Right.
Okay. In cathedrals of palmists, chapels of flamboyant, shrines of banana fronds, grottos of cocoa, groves of ripening mango, sanctuaries of anthurium, holy places of fern, praise the Lord. O cleanse this earth, O Lord, from hypocrisies of spirit, cruelties of heart, idolatries of mind, envies of eye, seductions of palm, besetting vices of soul. Save, O Lord, the profligate root, hunchbacked egret, bold-faced grackle, scandalous pipirit, idling gull, prowling hawk, neurotic flower sucker, critical hen. Let everything that have wings praise the Lord. I will sing unto the Lord for Shabin and Dougla, sweet eye and quick hip, gap tooth and full lip, long limb and smooth skin, beauty reluctant, grace divine, and send you forth with blessings, wayfarers of my heart.
Oh my God.
Reality, nitty-gritty reality, you know.
Isn't that beautiful?
Reality.
For me, this is one of the most beautiful
Yeah, thanks.
poems that
Beautiful.
have come out of this country.
And it's rooted in our culture,
Precisely.
in our experience, my flesh and blood reality. You see? And I think that's how we live, Marcus. That's how we live before the living God, man. We can't make no pretense. He knows us through and through. Our friends know us through and through.
Right.
Now, it's not saying that we are blazing in foolishness. I'm not talking about that. But I'm saying I'm a flesh and blood man. And if I'm doing art, that's what must come true. And how does flesh and spirit come together to manage and deal with what we have, you know? No room for pretense or hypocrisy there, you know?
Now, your journey as a mature Christian poet has brought you face to face with, let's say, the St. Lucian reality, but the global reality.
Sure.
I remember when the Haitian crisis.
Yeah, I wrote some poems on that, yeah.
With the earthquakes in Haiti.
That's right.
Again, right away, you were able to relate to that experience.
Yes.
And you produced work out of that situation.
I did. In fact, Papa, just to be mentioned, as you know, and brings us into a kind of technical development too. For many years, I've been working with images, word and image. My own photographs, I'm an amateur photographer, I like to say. Photographs of other things I get. Paintings by Caravaggio and different people. And I've written poems to these. Now, writing the poems, I'm working now with people like Gary Budd, Shalon Fadlin, who lives in Toronto, St. Lucian artist, Raphael Rinville Phillip. I love their work. They're great St. Lucian artists. And I write poems, but listen to what I say, out of their work. I'm not taking a Shalon Fadlin painting, or Gary Budd painting, or Caravaggio, and necessarily literally saying what's there. I wrote canticles over 10 years. I wrote a series of things, a cycle of poems on Gary Budd over a long period. I take the paintings I like, Shalon Fadlin, Gary Budd, whoever, and meditate on them. It's like the icon. You and I have spoken about making of the icon, like these people from the Orthodox churches. How do they make icons? These guys pray and fast and cleanse themselves and take a long time and almost allow the spirit to enter them and to make the image. I meditate on these images. I look at them. I think about them. I allow them to draw out of me what they want to say. So I'm not necessarily describing it. In some of them, I just did some series of poems on Shalon Fadlin's work, where I gave some of her images voice. The Haiti poems, there were some photographs from after the Haiti earthquake by Haitian photographer called Daniel Morel. A famous one, Marcus, you might remember it. There was a young woman under some rubble or something.
Right.
I actually have a picture somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay? And here's the poem I wrote out of that. And when I've read the poetry at first at Alias Francaise, I use picture projections of that. Okay? It's called Madonna of Port-au-Prince. So I'm talking now about working with images, what I get out of the images, responding almost intuitively to the images, not necessarily describing them, that the images speak to me. It's actually a poet called Kai Miller gave me the term. I didn't know the term. He said, you're doing ekphrastic art, he said. Ekphrastic magic, Greek ek out of something. So if you have a nice piece of music and you want to do a dance to it, you're doing ekphrastic. You're drawing. I'm doing ekphrastic art out of images which I like. Okay, writing poems to them.
Okay. And we'll have to come to dance and poem. So
Yeah. I've done for dance. Absolutely.
Right,
Absolutely. But here's this one on Haiti called Madonna of Port-au-Prince after the earthquake on January 12th from a Daniel Morel photograph. You who look like Alice, your eyes red with shattered plaster and weeping, your full lips bruised with dirt, your hairpiece of locks slipping back like a cowl, the powder dusting your oval cheeks is grey concrete. If the rest of you was not buried under rocks of blasted wall, and the figure in the foreground was not blood splattered, and someone's leg was not trapped behind you, you could have been a pretty girl, with sand on your bare arms, writing your name on a shell, on some beach of Lekai. You who look like Alice, another lost girl I used to know, not an icon's model on a chapel wall in Jacmel, but a strange Madonna anyhow, flat on the scattered masonry, sans enfant, or enfant gone from your hands to the devouring earth, the icon herself, impassive Ursule, gazing through your Carib face from a palette of pixels, framing now before me.
So your journey has brought you to this ekphrastic art, as you say.
Exactly, ekphrastic art, yeah.
It's like Derek, when he first published
Another Life.
Another Life, yes, he had this quotation which from somewhere there. Aminuchi Mabue
Yeah.
looks at Giotto,
Okay.
Right, yes. He used that as for the divided child. It's actually a quotation from Malraux, Psychology of Art. He says, an old story goes that Cimabue was struck with admiration when he saw the shepherd boy Giotto sketching sheep. But according to true biographers, it is never the sheep that inspires a Giotto with the love of painting, but rather his first sight of the painting of such a man as Cimabue. What makes the artist is the circumstance that in his youth he was more deeply moved by the sight of works of art than by the things which they portray. So it's the work of art more than the things they portray. And in a way, you speak about how Shannon, how Butts work, and how Dunstan's work.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And so this is the stage you've come to now, in which you're actually using other art to bring out. Let's get a little touch of that from City Remembrances, the poem you did for Dunstan, so that our audiences can get an idea of what's happening. So you're looking at Dunstan's work, and out of it, you've been inspired to produce.
Exactly. Now, let me say just a few things before. Canticles. I told you I wrote the booklet Canticles. Over 10, I started in 1997.
Right.
I finished in 2007. Because Canticles, I guess I had a conception in mind. If I wrote Canticles, Psalms, it was meant to be. I actually created, I think I can say as objectively as I can, actually create a form, the eight line stanzas. If you look at them, the line follows the breath. So it's I let it go as long as it wants to go. The rhymes are, there's something called terza rima, Dante, again, famous Christian writer. Right. 3 line, rhyming A, B, C, B, C, D, C. Okay? Not too difficult to understand.
Right.
I've been using those 3 line terza rima very often, especially a lot of my, even in City Remembrances, using a lot of half rhymes. So I created those 8 line canticles. If you look at canticles closely, they're all 8 lines. Even though in the printing they may seem to be more, but it's just because of the printing and the length of the line. But the 8 line stanzas. I think about 22 of them I wrote over the 10 years, gradually adding all the time. And 2007, I just sat down and said, I want to finish this. Up late at night, wondering, what am I going to write? I want to know what I want to say. Because I have things about Genesis, I have the Passion Canticles, Resurrection Canticles, canticles about writing.
Right.
So
making the icon.
Making the icon isn't there.
Yeah. But that's the one that really...
Well, let me just get for you before we do a Dunstan one.
Right.
It's right here. Word.
Okay.
We'll do quickly.
Yeah.
Okay? And we come to a Dunstan one maybe after the break.
Right.
But in fact, this sums up the whole approach to art or writing.
Right.
It says, you must now enter the silence alone and listen. Wait. Wait for the translation of the first line. Right. Translation. Very good translation. Write with your fingers, searching the pigments on the palette for the essential shading of the right image. The medium frames the sacred intercession. To give face, posture, and voice to the holy is no trite matter. And where humility unveils some gracious incarnation, offer first this blessed sacrament to the King of Saints. An American poet told me, he's an Orthodox man, told me, when the icon makers are making icons, they describe their approach as writing the icon.
Right.
When I heard that blew my mind, I said, hold on, man. For a writer, writing the icon? So I wrote this poem, and some places I actually call it writing the icon.
Right.
And you see, I use things like palette. Playing with the painting images on the tongue.
Right.
But it's really writing the icon. As writing an icon, my verses are icon too, even though I'm not painting. But of course, the visual thing is strong because I definitely go for strong.
It's like Eddie Bohr describing Derek talking about Dunstan painting as one of the most beautiful descriptions he's ever seen of the art of painting described. And so the writing of the icon helps you to enter into this process of the making of
But fascinating that you should call that writing the icon.
Writing the icon, yeah.
But let me give you a bit of Dunstan before we go. I think we have 5 minutes, Marcus, before?
Yes.
4.
Okay, so canticles for Dunstan, as I explained the canticles, 8 line stanzas, whatever. And if you get City Remembrances, you see 8 line stanzas there, terza rima, whatever, technical stuff. Apilo You set our liturgies to soar from high vaults, domes and altarpieces, castries, Moshi, Force Jacques Roseau, gave us voice to lift his praises on tambour, shak-shak and trumpet conch, shotwell and debord dances in the procession of priests. Tout mamai Creole, a first communion, a confirmation. He loves us as we are, our flower king. Before he was Madonna's, he was the Father's son, the Word begotten beyond comprehension. Look close within the Virgin's cowl in your icon, child reaching to mother, Abba embracing the beloved, mystery incarnation, blessed fruit of the hallowed eternal womb. Down to earth, he lived like you, paint on his hands, among farmers and fishermen, raising them to himself, wonderful Emmanuel. The man himself, you ask? See the grey-eyed rebel from Castries CDC housing, in wry amusement under doctoral cape, dead empires tapping sabre, papacy's golden medal, loping with irrevocable confidence, sober faith, flirtatious grin, about the streets and shortcuts of his city, sharing love and peace with brother beggar and young sister ass, such gentle, easy benediction. Saint Omer, actor, editor, tennis player and flag maker. The man, you say? No time for lackeys, party charlatans, or the whitening history he painted black on altar wall and road mural, under celebrating laughter of simple towns and hamlets where his easel rooted. Heaven, says Derek, is the place where painters go, so there you are, about your holy business, palette amazing, infinitude of canvases, your arrogance beatified in his light. It's not finished, seeing further and deeper, scaffolding under the dome's back, ad gloriam Dei, the making, Michelangelo, Giotto, Caravaggio, Apillo, O Paradiso. These are my canticles for Dunstan.
Yes.
Because Dunstan has had a great influence on my life as a writer, because what he did in his painting, I try to do in my writing.
Nice. Very nice.
Remember tears coming down when Derek heard O Paradiso and saw Dunstan's granddaughter
Right.
dancing at the mural in Jacques. Fantastic.
Nice.
Very sweet. So we're coming on the 4 o'clock hour now. We're going to break for the news, give these guys a rest, let them rest their vocal cords a little bit there. And,
Thank you.
No problem. So we'll be back around 4:06 or so, and we'll continue this up until 4:30. This is the author of the month here on Bon Après-midi Set Lycée with Marcus and Herma. Coming right back. Bon après-midi, Set Lycée.
Good afternoon, St. Lucia 4528368 to join the discussion here at wVent.
And apparently I have it on good word that we're actually making history here. So, so big up to all our listeners there. And if anybody, EB, you want to give a call at a quarter after? No problem.
Toronto listening in, I know.
Right.
So, we're here. This is Bon Après-midi Set Lycée with Marcus and Herma, and it's our author of the month. It's John Robert Lee, and he's being ably interviewed by Monsignor Patrick Anthony Paba. So turn it over to you guys. Yes.
Okay, Robbie, we were talking about your tribute to Derek, to Dunstan.
Right.
You've done tribute to Derek and these guys, but also to your link between the older generation and the younger generation. I mean, people like the Vladimirs, huh?
Vladimir Lucia,
I mean,
absolutely.
He just won Bocas, huh?
He won Bocas last year.
Following
what
Kendall?
Derek Walker did.
Derek?
Yeah. Derek won.
Incredible.
Yeah, and we did
Derek
with
was the
Vladimir
first.
already. Yeah.
Derek was the first to win, right?
Yeah, and Derek won both the poetry and the overall prize.
Poetry and the overall prize,
Kendall
right?
won the poetry prize,
prize, and now
and
Vladimir
Vladimir came and won the poetry and the overall prize.
I mean,
So in 27, every 2 years, so in 2017, we're looking to see who's going to win, which solution coming up again. Stand by for that.
Yes, and so you did some with Vladimir there, all right?
Yeah, Latimer had a photograph of 2 boats of Moruga in Trinidad, which I like. Again, I was saying earlier to our listeners, I've been working a lot with images,
Right.
ekphrastica. I'll just use that word for fun, okay? But taking an image, let it speak to me. There was 2 beautiful pictures of 2 boats on a sort of tossing the sea, at the edge of a sea a bit rough, but one boat is obviously moored, and the other boat is almost trying to break away, but the boat is moored one tied to another. And you can see like the further boat almost wants to break away. And I thought to myself, the poem is in that core, that rope between the 2 boats, because, there's one boat on the land, and the other one obviously wants to get away. So I wrote a poem out of this called Will Love Hold. Will love hold, tight roped between tears, certain a storm, not wanting loss, howling to horizon's abyss, heaving from despair. Will love hold memory to casual harbors? And we were happy for a while, and forgot tomorrow coming, and coordinates we couldn't share. Will love hold when all is broken, and merciful tides of amnesia cradle us till we wake?
Will love hold.
Will love hold.
Will love hold.
Exactly. We were happy for a while.
And in this country at the moment, will love hold. You know, in the midst of all that's happening, will love hold. Huh?
Exactly.
This brings us to our final phase, Robbie. Publications.
Right.
I mean, the problem we've had is the question of getting things published. And you've did some pioneering work in that. Established your own print press. You have to publish a lot of guys.
Most of my work has been published in St. Lucia.
Right.
Derek Walcott, 25 poems, which in a sense began Caribbean poetry. 25 poems, a landmark in Caribbean poetry. Was published first in Barbados, then in Trinidad. Was printed. This was published here by Derek's mother, teacher, who gave him $200, as he says in several places. It was printed, you can see it was published locally by the Walcott family. It was printed in Trinidad and Barbados, and it's sold here. In 1973, you helped to put out Pebbles, MacDonald Dixon. I wrote the introduction or something.
Right.
Okay? Since then I had my vocation. Kendall had Allen the Sun Part 2, local publishing, local printing. Many in the 70s, 80s, 90s, a lot of St. Lucian writers published books locally. Gandalf Sinclair called the name. George Goddard has just brought his first book of poetry. He was interviewed in the last Author of the Month here. First book of poetry, Injustice. I'm a strong believer in local publishing. I know we're a small country. We don't have any publishing firms active. We have printing houses. Get your manuscripts together. Because I'm a librarian and I know about book standards, I believe we should have our books good standards. I've produced several books and I like top quality. I work with Raphael Rindwell Phillip at Document Center. He's an artist and book designer. If you see City Remembrances, good quality books. Title pages in place and so on and so forth. Local publishing, as Kendall always says, we have a strong literary and literature tradition. And that is indicated by what we publish, what we produce. New generations are now on CD, even CD has passed now. It's all on thumb drives and YouTube and so on. Great, go for it. But put out stuff, because our tradition is built up. Our cultural tradition, our literary tradition, a country's tradition. It's not only tourism or hotels or big roads or one party for another. In England, what are they selling more? Shakespeare and John Milton and the cathedrals, the art and the culture. The art and the culture. So for us, our
heritage tourism,
our Sesame Descartes, our Calypsonians, our folk singers, our Mama Lakai, our singers. That's where the real St. Lucia is captured, and that will last when the politicians come and go, when buildings go up, come back down. But
Derek has always said it. Derek said, look at Greek culture. The Greeks were not fantastic military people.
Exactly.
But they conquered the world through culture.
Culture and their philosophy. And they still rule the world with it. Greek
and look at that today. I mean, we are not any big military nation. We don't have a lot of big amount of money.
Armies done
but
so.
In culture, cricket.
Exactly. Cricket.
Look at
Derek Walcott and Arthur Lewis.
Exactly. So this is, once you understand the nature of culture, you understand the nature of power, then you realize it's not in the material in the way in which we expect it, but it's in the spirit.
Ideas, thoughts, spirit. Exactly.
Culture, soul power. Soul power.
Culture is not the culture like certain friends of ours ought to like to say. The culture, the way of life of our people, which we ought to respect and help. We know their negatives. We know none of us is perfect. But the heart of every people is this culture. I often say, when we send delegations to Taiwan and so on, I don't think they've taken poets or painters yet, you know. When England travel on a trade mission, they carry their painters, their writers or whatever. Cuba, who are their ambassadors and the people in their offices? Writers, and so on. We yet have to learn the power and value of our history and our culture
Take a Jamaica. Jamaica is worldwide recognized. Right?
Bob Marley,
Usain Bolt. Culture.
That's right. Christopher Gale. Don't blush, baby. I love it no matter if they give him stick. Burma, don't blush, baby. So
small can be beautiful if we understand the nature of power.
And showing what you have by publishing it, whether it's a CD or whatever. Burma has been a program where she has young poets twice a day recording. That's what we're talking about. And use the media. The media is very important. I'm a media person. You know this for years. Media is important, especially in small societies, especially radio. TV is great. But now we have YouTube, everything else. So it's out all of them. But radio is still valuable.
Instagram,
Let the people hear.
Twitter, you know,
Publish it.
let's go,
Let
you know.
people hear. Yeah.
That's fine. Open the lines, brother. We're ready to interact. You
And
know.
before I go, I'll give you about 2 new poems as a special treat to...
do that.
You want
do
it right
that,
now?
Do that.
No, go ahead, do that.
No, at the end, man.
At the end, okay. We're not done yet.
Do one now for you. Okay.
Right.
Papa hasn't even heard this. My good friend, he hasn't even heard this new poem yet. It's called Rainbow in Balata. Friends in Balata.
All right.
And it comes out of the art of Shalon Fadden, whose work I really like these days. It's a young solution artist, female artist, living in Toronto. Her work is great, and I've been writing a cycle of poems to her work. That's something called Rainbow in Balata for Shalon. And Shalon is listening, I believe, this afternoon. Say hello to you. How are you doing out there? Okay. A story for you. In late afternoon drizzle, coming home through familiar Balata, is blossoming gardens of mangoes, gloricidia, and palms branches like multi-winged cherubim. In that light, a huge rainbow, close as heaven, spectrum a palette of red to indigo and a sister violet. And I saw the end down a footpath, settled like a full-bodied beauty on a bench under a breadfruit tree there of Balata. This true story is for you, and the unlooked-for embrace of the arms of your tender-hued interest which surprised me, coming round this bend like that arc-en-ciel. A lot of my poetry, more and more, you notice, I'm getting more and more St. Lucian in a sense. Balata, Monnier,
Right.
name the places,
Earthing,
breadfruit
grounding.
trees, grounding, but with the spirit, obviously, you know, and we are responding to the paintings of our good St. Lucian plates. So, and I think, and of course, technically, when you look closer, you see the technical thing is there,
Right.
rhymes and so on are there. But this is, so St. Lucian's now through us, the painters, Duncan St. Thomas, Shalon Fadden, Gary Budd. We're seeing ourselves, we're hearing ourselves.
Reggae St. Thomas.
Reggae St. Thomas, a great artist.
Yeah.
But our folk music,
Yeah.
we're talking about ourselves. Jamaica, why Jamaica has so much power? Jamaicans singing about England or New York? No. Jamaicans singing about in a yard, down in the ghetto, in language, I don't care whether you understand or not. But everybody's singing Jamaican songs.
Yeah.
The power of the culture of who you are. And so for us as St. Lucians, following Walker and St. Thomas, as a writer, I'm following that line. I'm talking about, I live up in Plateau Babano. I write about Plateau Babano, about pumpkins and coffee trees and coffee flowers and so on, the beautiful ladies, full-bodied beauties, sitting on benches under breadfruit trees. Isn't that right? Isn't that what we should be talking about? Why not? Go on, Pops. None of you guys want to commit yourselves around here.
452-8368. You can join the conversation right here on WVENT 92.5, 94.7.
Beautiful.
That is
By Shalon Fadden.
beautiful.
By Shalon Fadden. And I've written a poem to this. Beautiful work.
Yeah.
And there's Gary Budd. I keep mentioning these names of these young artists whom I have a good relationship with. I work well with them.
You know the potential. There's so much potential.
Precisely.
Out there.
Precisely.
So much skill. So much talent.
We have a call?
Yes, we do.
Who's there?
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon.
Aha.
Hey, that
Hi,
sounds like the Boots game himself.
Rasta.
Hey, and Robert.
Yes, I. How things?
This is really, I agree with whoever said we're making history this afternoon.
Okay.
Because basically today's program has highlighted the difference between talk radio and regular radio.
Yes, sir.
The difference between wVent and every other radio station in St. Lucia. The fact that you guys have been able to get me to sit down for 1 hour.
Woo! And you're not down in Beaufort, Gasson?
And no, not down in Beaufort alone. I'm not even down by my favorite watering hole.
Okay, now we know. Well, you were part of the history we're talking about. You were there.
In fact, I'm benefiting from the Beaufort thing because yesterday, Digital put out something saying they were given triple credit honor of Darren Sammy and the West Indies win.
Okay.
Great.
And I was like, what?
I'm not a digital customer.
Triple credit for Darren Sammy.
Lovely.
I said, I'll take triple credit.
Thank you.
Might have need to use it.
like right now.
Like right now.
Great, beautiful, gotcha. But let me just interrupt quickly. Every we speak about this on Papa now, you were there with us.
right now.
Full show and your cultural group. It's our generation. We're talking about our generation,
I
man.
call earlier.
Yes, right.
I don't want to disturb.
Yeah. The
this,
flow.
This unique work of art. Papa
Yes,
interviewing Robert on wVent, which I would like to publicly request the copyright to be the editor of that book.
That's Papa's book.
With
Right?
Herma, of course, with Herma and Marcus, knowing that we will not never remember to not forget their role in ensuring this. No, but coming to the seriousness of the matter, Papa, you and Robert and I know how far back we go, and the contribution in terms of what following Robert's history as a writer has been able to allow St. Lucians who have been listening to understand, and including me, because I'm speaking here not as a writer or as a presenter at wVent, but as Charles Bousquet Fulashu's son. And it brought me back to the days in Fulashu when every big rain before climate change became a phrase that we know, when every big rain flooded Fulashu. And I remember writing the only poem I can remember writing with the intent of writing a poem, and it was 3 pages long. But each line is only 2 words. Kendall Hippolyte saw it and said he made me feel good about it. But up to now, I know it passed.
Right, okay.
Yeah, but Kendall will probably remember it. And I listened to the thread of Robert's history as a writer. And as a fellow writer, I have been writing elsewhere about other things, but can resonate with what he's been writing about and the factors and events that influence his writing. On the 1st of April was 40 years since I got my first job as a reporter in journalism. But then I listened to you guys, and I remember that when Moments,
yes,
was presented in Monshi.
That's right, yeah.
I covered that, and that was the
Caribbean
first article I
for
wrote
Caribbean
for the
Contact.
first issue of Chronicles in The Voice.
Okay. Oh, in The Voice, okay. Who did the Caribbean Contact article? Because somebody did for you.
I did.
Oh, you did
That's
for
right,
me.
yeah.
Okay,
I
all
did.
right. Okay.
So it reminds me now that I started before I remember when I started. Because I remember going to Moments in Miku. And
Moshi.
leather shoe, and I was like sliding down the road because that road to the Moshi church where the activity took place never knew anything called Baba Green or cement. We were walking and sliding on stones. And then when one looks at where we've all come through, I listened to Robert, his evolution. I know of Papa's evolution. And Papa, my father, before I got to know you, my father sent me to church to listen to this. I will not say what he described this person as, but this Anthony fella, I'll call it. This Anthony fella,
Right. Oh,
and
yes.
my father stopped. He said, had he not stopped going to church already, he would never go back to church. Because this St. Lucian guy had introduced drugs in church and had defiled the Catholic tradition by not wearing white. His robe was the first. He said that proper St. Lucian priests, who I will not name because they're still alive, proper St. Lucian priests would not do that. But then came Father John.
The real radical.
And if they thought Father John was something, come with this Pada fellow. And eventually, he told me something that is probably telling. He told me that Papa fellow, you can say what you want, he'll never be bishop in St. Lucia. I say, why? He say, you won't understand, but he'll never be bishop in St. Lucia.
He understood, your father understood the
A
society.
million years later, Papa Robert and I all ended up in the Folk Research Center. And Papa, you will know that I'm probably the longest lasting elected chairman of the Folk Research Center to date. And was privy to and participated in most of the decisions from the very first June Creole, which has now metamorphosed into a Maoritage Creole, to everything else. And when one looks at and one listens to what was being presented today, it says to me in one of those rare moments of, you know, dislocating myself from the politics and economics and the things that drive me. It says to me that here we are talking about what is the next phase of the politics, who will be the next leaders. But it also, from listening to what you've been saying, says to us, who are the heirs and successors? Who will be the heirs and successors of Derek Walcott, Paba, and Robert Lee? You mentioned Vladimir Lucien.
Yeah, fine young man, very good young man, yeah.
You know, won the Boca up in the tradition of those whom you mentioned. And it brought to my mind, you've been inviting calls from day one, and nobody has called.
The people are listening,
And
though.
I would like to believe that it is because the information is so real, so new, so relevant that nobody felt like disturbing the flow. But the Folk Research Center, after all of those years, is at the stage where it has launched the Harold Simmons Folk Academy.
Struggling but there.
Pardon?
Struggling but there, but alive.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean,
That's the story. Struggle is always there.
He was posthumously awarded earlier this year.
That's right.
By who? And I'm not talking government here.
No. Dame Paulette Louisiane, one of the foundation stones of FRC.
As a member of the Folk Research Center, along with Paba and everybody, and Robert and everybody else, was one of the silent initiators of Jude Creole. And then I say, Paba, where are we today with things like Théâtre Pepla and the importance of oral history in drawing to everybody what we need to know? And then there was this recent thing that came out, I can't remember what it was for, it was Independence or not, inviting persons to go and interview persons in English.
Nice, yeah.
Yeah, you know,
good
as
project,
a contribution. And it brought me back to the fact that all of those things were initiated by the Folk Research Center and were practiced by Théâtre Pepla and the other cultural groups of the time, which resonated and attracted that culture and that response in what in those days used to be regarded as rural communities. Well, we don't have rural communities anymore in St. Lucia. Everywhere is accessible within an hour by road. However, the history and the facts that reside in the minds of those who are leaving. I got an invitation to a birthday celebration of a St. Lucian lady who is 112 years old this week. 112 years old.
In St. Lucia now?
In St. Lucia, right now as we speak.
What?
And then I heard a story on a radio station here saying that the Guinness World Book of Records will now have to review its statistics, because it states that the oldest person alive is a 112-year-old person in Japan.
Right, yeah.
But they have now discovered that there's somebody who is over 200 and something years old in Nigeria.
In Nigeria, okay.
In Nigeria, yeah. Now, I ain't going there, that'll take too long. But I'm saying,
Okay.
Has anybody in St. Lucia, has a family of that person, has anybody who knew that this lady is 112 years old,
Spoken with her,
ever
recorded
thought
her.
of,
Yes, just
Oral history, yeah.
of putting that fact for her and for St. Lucia? Because she could very well have been born in January, because if her birthday, well, she's born in March. What if the person in the Guinness World Book of Records was born in September? Then the St. Lucian lady qualifies even before the 200-year-old one until they could prove she's that old. So I'm saying that the last point or the latter point that was made by all of you is that the society has not recognized and paid respect to the importance that culture can play in diplomacy.
Right.
The importance that the people who have put us on the world map through sports, through writing, they talk about Walcott or Darren Sammy, where they talk about Paba. You know, Paba, I just finished doing a series in The Voice on the socialism on the rebound. And that is 40 years old after you wrote your series in the Crusader on whether a Catholic can be a socialist. You know, so everything that happens has its origin, but also, and probably even more important, is everything that happens has its future. And that's why I said I agree with whichever of you said what's happening today is history.
Yeah.
Because St. Lucians will never have heard
yes, I said that.
what they heard today.
Yeah.
And it wasn't an interview of Robert by Paba. It was a revelation of a chapter in our history. You know,
of which I repeat, of which you were part. I repeat.
All of those other persons who
Yes.
were part and
Exactly.
parcel
Sequoias.
of
Yes.
that generation.
Men and women too. Yes.
As Robert says, ours is an ageless line.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yes.
Indeed.
So,
Indeed.
let me say, I was glad to be part of that history.
Yes, man.
Yes, right.
Wonderful.
Okay? Have a nice day, friend.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
great.
thanks, sir.
Bye.
All right.
Okay.
Good man.
I'll end with a poem
Yeah.
for you. So
I
should
think,
we?
I think
Sorry.
that you should postpone the ending for a
No
little
problem.
bit. Let's take another call.
Sure, no
Radio,
problem.
Good afternoon.
Okay, give us a
Hi,
time.
good afternoon.
Good
Good
afternoon.
afternoon.
How you doing?
Fine.
Fine, thank you.
Good afternoon, Baba. Good afternoon, Robert.
Good afternoon, man. How are you doing?
Kenzie?
You know, on my way up, I listened to you talk about your journey in Black Power and Rasta. And you said that Rasta told us about Black God and our Black Jesus. Alright? Remember that, Robert?
Yes, of course. Oh, yeah. I'd say I'm a Rasta with a logical end to Black Power. The Americans didn't go as far as Rastas did.
Yeah.
Rastas were more radical.
For years, I've been studying the Black Power movement in the Caribbean. I remember the leaders of the Black Power movement. And in my mind, they failed us. That the same, you know, when Hunter Francois and them fought for us to wear shirt jacks in Parliament and sandals, I now see everybody want to have the best suits. Only few people have shirt jacks in this society. They wear it with dignity, and few and less wear sandals after the struggle. That was a struggle. Alright? So sometimes I ask myself, I wonder how Paba views his river of life. All the hard work with the Folk Research Center, I mean, FRC, Kokigo Singers, etc., Paba. I wonder how, I mean, because the journey of life has to end, you know. We start from the source right down to until we reach the sea. That's our river. Because for me, right, as a young St. Lucian, in fact, I'm no longer young, that there's so much hope for me as a Black Power advocate. You know, I'm involved with Black Power, I'm involved with Black Studies, etc., the church. Baba gave me the document called to be, you know, I mean, I could spell it, I mean, I couldn't tell what was on page 8 or all kind of things, right? And after years, Baba, I'm asking myself, what was that for? Now, you're in the arts.
Yeah.
So therefore, there's always room for poems, the poet will read their poetry, etc., right? I remember our journey through jazz, we first playing jazz every Thursday night by Butcher.
Right.
You know, we had all those things happening. We had Beta N. All
right,
those
George
things.
Odlum.
were just
Yes.
a journey.
Right.
So I'm asking myself, what was that, all that for? Because I've seen, Papa, in my lifetime, that the persons who were involved, who were your lieutenants, you know, your sergeants, right? They are the most capitalistic in the society today.
Careful, Kingsley.
What's that?
Careful, Lynch, careful.
Careful? That's what you said, Robert?
Yeah, just careful. I was just teasing you, man.
Okay, right?
I hope you know an old talk when you hear one.
I said, but had we grasped what it meant, Papa, you know what could have happened? So even the experiment, I mean, called to be Black Studies, etc. I mean, I do understand Vatican II. You explained that to me and the others, right? You know, look at where we are now.
Yeah.
How have our church developed? You know, I mean, I sometimes I joke with Lacha, right?
Right.
Because teachers, we actually had a seek out because they sent Lacha and Hillary, or, you know, they transferred them because they wanted you to be the guest speaker.
At Safa, yes.
At Safa.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Yes,
I remember that.
That's our
I
history.
remember that, yeah.
But after all of that, I asked myself, but what was that for?
Yeah.
We've gone full, Papa, we've gone full cycle, you know. I don't know how they're going to start it.
Yeah.
The programs you had about, I mean, going to the prison, etc., right? Good programs. Where, I mean, what has happened to these programs? We did not carry them. That's all I find personally, is that we, the Black Power, I mean, a good thing for the after is not get the power, right? We replace the colonial masters with ours. We've not changed nothing for the people. The whole subsidiarity principle, which I get from Catholic social teaching, Papa, right? No, I mean, we don't understand it.
Yeah.
Our people are not empowered. I mean, when I think of the permanent secretaries, Martin Elwin, Lieutenant Thomas has a degree, Martin Elwin, Cornelius Lubin is still alive, right? And those guys now have PhDs. I rather serve and work with those fellas. What has education led us to? I don't know. I mean, I'm always questioning myself. I look in the mirror. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I see Markley and probably Dwight with the afro. One or two of them have afro. And I say, but what is, I mean, everybody has afro. I have that shiki, Robert. You're right, Robert. But we've all gone back to Europeanized. Most of us, Robert.
Well, be careful. Don't say we all and most of us, because
most of us.
yeah,
Most of us. I could use the correct language because I mean my head prefect Robert Lee is there, you know.
Right.
You know?
But of course, let me just go and say something though. I hear you, I hear all you saying.
Yeah.
But again, you see, generations turn around.
Yeah.
And today, if a young man wants to wear a nice suit to look good, take his lady out, I mean, you know, hey, it's a free country last I heard. He's free to do that.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily have to see, because the way a young, say my son is 20-something, 22, he wants to wear a suit. He doesn't come at all that generation where for us, to wear a suit was, hey, no way, I'm going to wear dashik or whatever.
Yeah.
A young man doesn't know nothing about that. He wants to wear a nice suit, he wants to put his hair in a nice style, whatever, and the young ladies want to dress up. Hey, free it up. I have no problem with that. You know what I'm saying to you?
Well, you
So,
know,
but I hear what you're saying, but at the same time.
Yeah, in terms of the struggle, you know, when we were struggling to have Cuba recognized by the U.S. and so forth. I mean, today, I mean, look at
exactly.
I remember going to Cuba for about 10 years. I was president of WAC Carib. And at that time, it looked as though, boy, what is all this stuff about? You know why? Because the young Cubans were saying all this revolution. You know, and that was Fidel and them fellas, you know. I mean, they were looking Miami side, you know. That's where they were looking, you know, because for them, the memory of the resolution was a distant memory.
That's right.
You know. However, I mean, look at where we are today. Look at where we are today. I mean, you know, life moves on. I think the work we've done, that cannot be undone.
That's right.
The seeds you've sown, the seeds you've sown, right, have set a path that is part of our history. It will be recovered and discovered again at the appropriate time. And those of us who are in the struggle just have to keep on persevering, doing our work. As you say, FRC is still there, you know. I'm still there, you know. Robert is still there. We're still doing our thing in a different time, in a different way. But, you know, we are we still have the faith. That's the important thing.
Yep.
We have the faith. Yeah.
You know, I think after the last Seder meal I attended, I sent an email. The Jews tell the children every year about the Passover.
Right.
We ain't telling our children nothing,
Yeah.
right? And another
Well, at least I'm trying. Huh?
And-
I mean, that's,
and-
I didn't know.
right,
I am
that's
trying.
The last point, right?
Yeah.
Once we are there, poets, etc., and a few following and people are seeing us, right? You know what happened, Papa? After Reagan and them entered Grenada, all the Black Power fellas run for cover, you know.
Yeah.
That's what happened. Black Power fellas ran for cover. They emerged with their suits. That's what happened to us in the Caribbean, Baba.
Yeah, yeah, because you see, there was what they, you see, can you see, the guys understood.
No, I'm talking, I take nothing very serious. No,
They
Baba.
understood
I believe in what I believe in.
Santa Fe.
Yeah.
The guys knew about Santa Fe. They knew about the Santa Fe. They knew of the plan, all right?
Yeah.
And the plan was elimination. So, but you have to play, you know, you have to play
To
a
run
Nancy.
away, you have to run away to
You
fight
have to
another
play
day.
Nancy. You
Ramani
know?
said run away to
You
fight
have to
another
play
day.
Nancy
But
to
I don't know
survive.
if we go fight back again. I don't know. We have to do it Baba, in a different
Because
way.
you see, because don't forget that the enemy is ruthless. They eliminate you, they wipe you out completely.
Yeah, we knew that, but that is why the Jews have survived, Baba, because they have this cedar mill. And they remind the children of the history.
That's
So
it, that's
if
it.
we are reminded about
We
these
ha-
people, we'll not be talking about the reparation.
We ha-
We'll not be begging for it, we'll be demanding it.
Right.
Every child would know about where we come from, what happened to us in that Atlantic triangle. We would have known
Well,
it.
that is why let me
I learned that from the Jews, Papa, and thank you for the cedar mill.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Inch, let me tell you, as we wrap up this, let me tell you,
Yeah.
that's why people like Papa and myself for years have been saying our education system in St. Lucia has problems. We do not have St. Lucian culture in our schools. We don't have St. Lucian history. We don't have St. Lucian literature. I had a recent meeting at FRC, I can say publicly, with the Chief Education Officer, very open and willing, and he wants us to meet with his curriculum officer. After all these years, perhaps, we make a little breakthrough where we can talk with the curriculum officer and FRC can help them. And we talk about this for years, not just us, other people around listening to us now. St. Lucians will not remember all the things you're talking about. We have no African history. We have no real Caribbean history. We have no St. Lucian history. All the St. Lucian literature we're talking about, it's not in our schools. Our St. Lucian culture is not there. But we need somehow to get into there too.
But I want
Yeah.
to start this. Let us start
And we end up.
celebrating
But
the
let me tell you, huh?
Yeah.
For me, Darren Sammy
Right.
is a symbol of why we are doing what we're doing.
Precisely.
You know what he said?
Right.
Believe.
Right.
Believe.
Yeah.
You know, against all the odds, believe. So you may seem to think that it's looking so much, you know, but just Kingsley,
Exactly.
believe.
I
And
believe,
victory will-
Papa.
Planting seed, man.
Right.
Good to hear you,
You know,
man.
but I am a realist. I'm like Jesus Christ, you know. I'm a pragmatic, you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Kingsley. Thanks.
Okay, man.
But Robert, how do you balance? I'm gonna let you go.
Go on, no.
How you balance the regional curriculum, right,
Yeah,
and
sure.
the regional examinations
Right.
with what you're talking about? Because that to me is where we're at. I mean, it's the examination, teaching for the exams, and creating. You know, I mean, is it to the detriment of our St. Lucian identity that we have we promote a Caribbean identity within the examination process?
To speak quickly to that, there's a call coming in. We have to make room for ourselves, even within the regional provisions we're making. We have to make room for ourselves.
wVent Radio, good afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
sir.
Is the word Roro Creole or English, and what is the origin?
Leave that for Papa. He's our expert.
Thank you.
St. Lucian.
I suspect this is a St. Lucian.
No, but isn't it row? Like to row, like an English word?
Yeah, but
Like if you row around, I mean, in England they use it as a slang for fighting.
Yeah, but the row as such, the indigenized form of it,
Right, right.
maybe a St. Lucian kind of adaptation to that.
Well,
very good
It's
question.
kind of like Creole because I mean,
Yeah,
basically
it
you
is
took
a Creole
English,
thing.
you took Spanish, you took whatever, and you made it into our
Roro,
language.
Roro.
Right.
Yeah.
Miroro. It has to be a Creole creation. A great question, I would say, but we have to think about that one. Give us something to think about.
So, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us today.
Can I finish off with the poem?
You can
I'd love to
finish,
do that.
of course.
And we can end off on that note.
Yeah, no problem.
Beautiful. Okay, let me read you
Well,
a
I
poem.
must say
Sorry,
that,
go on, Papa.
you know, I took what Kingsley said, you know, and what others said, you know, important that we must don't lose faith.
No, of course not. No.
Don't lose faith. I mean, we
why
have
we
struggled
continue.
for so long. I mean, I remember when we started FRC, in 73.
The resistance.
I mean, the resistance, you know, the kind of cynicism, that kind of thing. If we did not stick at it,
Exactly.
would we have, I mean, could you imagine a phenomenon like Junior Creole?
So
Exactly.
73.
Never existed.
Yeah,
That was
43 years ago.
6 years before independence.
Yeah, you know.
So you were
yeah.
fighting
Precisely.
down the Anglophones and
everything.
right?
But today we've created new things, and we're creating new things, you know. And for me, that is a journey of faith. Journey of faith. Where it will end in the end, man. Look, man.
Others will have to decide.
Yes,
Generations to come.
generations to come.
But we do our part.
We do our part. Okay.
On that note, I want to end with a poem for all of you, for Herma, Marcus, for you,
That's
for
great.
Paba, for those listening, and for special people listening this afternoon. When, dear, you have gone far beyond dwarf planets, galaxies of diaphanous nebula, and incomparable deeps of incredible space. This one book I have been writing since you met me in the midday of my journey, confused and without direction, in a maze of deep ravines and dead rivers, sucked dry, cast away by Sukuyans and devil women without remembered names. And you took me into the house of your slow-eyed laughter and your faith and loved me. This one book I have been writing in canticles Creole, dancing lines of La Comète and Widova, their violons and shak-shak in my ear, an epistle of a testament to your wonderful King, the maker of the spheres. This one book you will see in his compassionate hands, and hear him read for you the inadequate, untranslatable, unsayable words of my gratitude for you, my love, my faith companion, my gift of his incomprehensible grace. So let it be done.
Well done.
Thank you very much
The
for
master
having us.
said, "Go in peace."
Sorry like that. Johnson Sonoma said to me once, he said, "You're a Protestant guy." He said, "You know, all the Protestants are only Catholics in disguise, worse side effect, you know." A lot of my poetry, I'm Baptist pastor, but a lot of my poetry draws on Catholic imagery. That's for sure. I have no hesitation saying that. Precisely, you know.
I mean, a lot of people would probably take umbrage with this comment, but I mean, obviously, if we were 92% Catholic up until 1960,
Precisely.
that so influenced who we are as a people
of course.
that even with the movement towards, you know, small churches and, and other church denominations
influence is
coming
there.
in, you know, I mean, it's generations before it washes out. I
Exactly.
mean, you know.
And for me as a Christian, listen, for me, I hold all the Christian tradition. Catholic, Protestant, Orthodox. I read across the board. I learn from all of them. Because when you go to early history, we're always one before the breaks came. There's so much, all the fathers, Augustine, all the rest of it. So for me, I open myself to these, and I learn, and my own personal blocker or aisle in the corner is enriched by I learn from all the traditions. Even though I go to my own eye on the thing. You know?
At the end of the day, I think anybody who is faith-oriented is going to have more points of agreement with people than they would disagreement. I mean, often we take a little tiny thing and we magnify it into the big difference between us. But the reality is monotheism and you know, that kind. I mean, it's all the same. I mean, I even with people of non-Christian faiths, I mean, you can often...
You can find, of course, you can combine...
And I mean, fundamentally, it's all about love.
Right.
I mean, and that covers everything.
Yeah. The golden rule, right?
Everything.
The golden rule
You know,
for every religion.
Love God, love your neighbor.
Yeah.
Anyway, gentlemen, thank you
very
very
much.
much.
Marcus.
That's fantastic.
Thank you,
Remember, this
really.
is your radio station. We welcome you guys. If you have any good ideas, you know, we want to give them voice here because this is the kind of stuff that resonates with people. This is what this is like. The people like sponges that just soak this stuff up because this is what they need to get. What Earl was saying, what we deliver here at wVent is much different than what people are getting other places. So thank you very much for enriching us today. We really appreciate it. It's wVent 93.5, 94.7. We're going to take a break. We're coming back.